Hello, hello everyone. Let's start with our second session, climate change and climate risk management, which will take us into the heart of climate science and risk management, with climate change being one of the most pressing issue of our time. This session will equip us with tools and access and mitigate risk with fostering ability into our business. We are privileged to have Mr. Aro, who is Chief of Staff and Head of Product here, to lead this engaging session. Over to you, Aro.
Thanks, Sakshi. And sorry to bore you with my face again, but I think this session will be less dry. And this might also be something new for some of us. It's not regulation per se, but it's more what we see in the built environment around us, how it impacts our business, and then how can we mitigate, manage these risks. A little bit on that, not a lot of depth, but a lot of breadth around what is climate change, how it's affecting us. So, yeah, can you guys also settle down? Amita, Adil, can you guys also sit, settle down, or if you're right, so let's start with this, right? So some of us would know this, some of us won't know. I'll obviously tell, but which is the hottest planet in the solar system, right? Any guesses? Venus. Okay, so the ESG folks would know, and some of the climate pros know. So common logic would say closer you are to the sun, the hotter you would be, but it is Venus because Venus has a large amount of greenhouse gases, specifically carbon dioxide in its atmosphere, right? So the numbers are here. We have on Earth, I think 0.04% of carbon dioxide, and Venus is about 96.5%, and that leads to a lot of warming, right? So the warming happens due to something called as greenhouse effect, and that's why these gases are called greenhouse gases in the first place. So again, the climate professionals would know this, but there is a distinction between what weather is and what climate is, right? So weather is day to day. So today the weather is warm, there is some humidity, there is some rain, we can call it weather. Climate is long-term weather patterns for a region. And typically averaged over 30 years, but could be longer also, that the climate in this area for last 100 years has been so and so. So it is a composite of day-to-day weather averaged over a large period of time. So we are not looking at weather change as a problematic theme. Of course, weather change will be an effect of climate change, but it is the long-term systemic thing that is developing, systemic risk that is developing. That is more of a bigger business concern, right? And what is causing all of this climate change? It's human activity. So I think it has now been scientifically proven that it is human activity that is leading to climate change and to all of the greenhouse gas emissions. There are so many emission sources that are naturally occurring, right? Fires happen naturally a lot of times. Animals release methane in the atmosphere, even your water vapor is a greenhouse gas, but it is all of this built environment and human activity that has exponentially shot that balance up and led to climate change. So it is energy use, industrialization, agriculture, hyper-consumerism, fossil fuels, which in turn has led to greenhouse gases and global warming. And when compared, like all of these activities didn't exist even 250, 300 years ago, right? So it's a very recent shift that has happened. So when we talk about things like global warming, it is actually a naturally occurring phenomena. Global warming is supposed to happen. Why it is become a problem area is because we've accelerated that rate of change. So what was supposed to happen in 10,000 years, we've done it in less than 50 years, right? So that is why it's problematic. This is still an older number. The new report said 2024 was the hottest year, right? So before 2023, 2020 and 2016 were the hottest years on record. from a global average perspective, and now it's subsequent years, right? So 2023, 2024, hottest, and God knows where 2025 will go. So all of this has created a lot of these impacts, right? So it is leading to weather patterns changing, which is an impact or effect of climate overall changing. So the areas that used to receive good rainfall have stopped receiving that amount of rainfall, or have started to receive double the rainfall, which will create all of floods and more systemic risks. So more than 2 million people have been displaced from their original habitats because of weather related activities. There is ocean acidification that has happened. More than 35 million people are affected by floods, and this has now slowly become an annual number. First it was a cumulative number, now it's more like an annual number. So annually those many people are getting affected, and every year there are hundreds and thousands of deaths happening because of climate change, to an extent that some regions in India, specifically in Rajasthan, some parts of Gujarat, are said to exceed the human survival limit of heat, right, of temperatures, when it goes beyond what you can survive in the outdoors. So it was predicted to happen this year. Hopefully, I don't know what mitigation measures have gone in. So global temperatures, okay, so let's look at a little bit of this, right? What is a greenhouse gas, and what is the greenhouse effect, right? So energy comes from the sun in form of these long waves that enter the Earth's atmosphere, and the Earth absorbs some of the heat, some of it is radiated back. Now typically that heat, a large part of that should escape, but it gets trapped. It gets trapped because of this sort of a gaseous layer, and it traps short waves, which is what gets reflected back. And more of this trapped will heat up the atmosphere. It is a slower process. It will not immediately create a lot of risk, but cumulative risk becomes very high. So why is it called the greenhouse effect? Any thoughts? Why is it called the greenhouse effect? How did that term come into being?
Protecting greenery things from the sun.
Okay.
Direct effect of the sun.
So actually greenhouses retain heat, and they are used in colder regions to develop plants, right? Even today we'll see a lot of greenhouses. So actually the term greenhouse gas or greenhouse effect came from greenhouses. Greenhouses came first, and then came greenhouse effect, and it effectively kind of creates this kind of an effect on Earth, right? Like you are putting it in a greenhouse. So that heats the overall atmosphere up, which will in turn heat the land, heat the sea, and then again newer types of cyclic risks will come up. So again, any guesses what was the average temperature of the Earth during the last ice age? Ice age is 20,000 years from now, when the planet was totally frozen. All parts of the planet were covered in ice, and that was the maximum, the peak of ice age. What was the temperature? Any random number, doesn't have to be precise. Guesses?
Minus 65.
Minus 65, one number. Anyone else?
Minus 50.
Minus 50, okay. 4. Okay, that's probably the closest. So it was 8 degrees. The global average, so it is a little counterintuitive because we live in a country that generally sees more warm days than cold days. So we have we are not good at averaging temperature out for the globe. Just adding the poles to the overall Earth's equation, poles are always, most of the times they're frozen. So just adding those and averaging it out reduces that minus to a positive number, and then the more regions you add. So, and this is global average temperature. So this region could still have been plus 16. Another region in, let's say, Siberia or the North Pole could have actually been minus 65 or even worse. So what is the average temperature now? What is the sense right now? Hello Narendraji, how are you doing?
Hello man, hello.
आपके लिए मोटिवेशन के लिए आया।
Thank you so much.
Wish you all the best.
Yeah, so what do we think the average temperature would be right now? It was 20,000 years ago, and the earth was completely frozen. So what is the average now? 20 to 22 is one answer. 30 is one answer. Global average 20. So that's close, but it's 15. Actually, it's not short way far, but it has increased at an average rate of 0.06 degrees per decade since 1850s. So that's about 200, close to 200 years now. But since 1982, it has increased 3 times as fast. So typically a 15 degrees from a 8 degrees is a huge shift. We don't realize that because we are more intuitively we'll see weather, right? Ki itna difference so we can have in a day. So how does this matter? But this is global average, and even a 0.1% increase kills a lot of species immediately. So because this increase has happened from like what was supposed to happen in, again, tens of thousands of years, has happened in the last 3 centuries, it has led to a lot of I would say concern, and that's why a lot of bodies came together and created several agreements, created several protocols. So it started all the way from UNFCCC, which is an organization, gave birth to the Kyoto Protocol. All of these leaders met, they decided on some terms, but this was a voluntary kind of protocol that we'll come together, we'll sign some terms, and there is no penalty, but we are voluntarily coming together. So it didn't succeed, it didn't do very well. This was back in 92, I think, and then it kept evolving for a while, but it just lost traction. Then came Paris Agreement, which is now again becoming a hot topic because Trump pulled out of the Paris Agreement. But that has been, I think, in the recent past, the most iconic or most instrumental in driving climate change resilience, driving more carbon action planning. And then there are several events that we are now familiar with. We are all familiar with SDGs. We are also now familiar with COPs. So every COP has a sustainability centric agenda. The last one was in Baku the previous year. Next I think is in Brazil. So because we are participating more and more in these, we get to hear about these a lot more, right? But the historical context is all of these came into being to solve for this, right? 15 degrees Celsius is a lot from a global average standpoint. Now, what this has led to is a lot of disasters that are uncalled for. And natural disaster is one thing, there was an earthquake, there was a hurricane. There were again unpredictable black swan events that will wipe out a chunk of economy and a lot of assets with them. But now there are so many man-made disasters and so many disasters that we cannot predict even looking at last 300 plus years of data, right? That is because one, we don't have enough historical data to actually compare climate trends. But from 1998 to 2017, there have been hurricanes, earthquakes, storms, landslides, drought, wildfire. We have seen it, right? We have seen torrential rains in Delhi. We have seen the Wayanad incident last year. Right now, a lot of fires in LA, and every year the wildfires in US, Florida, LA, all of those regions are getting worse and worse. This time they came all the way to cities. And I shared actually in our internal group, I shared this one quote that said, these climate events will keep coming closer and closer to us to an extent that first we'll hear about them, then we will hear our friends talk about them, and then we will be the one shooting that video, right, that we are seeing on social media right now. And that happened literally, Sushil is here and we were talking to Sushil, and Sushil was saying, oh, I was in this area like 5 years back, 4 years back, and I'm seeing videos of that area with wildfires and everything burning around. So it is coming closer and closer to us. I think Europe is still not seen massive events, but most other geographies, including India, are seeing that, right? Droughts, rainfall, excess rainfall is also bad, so it's not like rain is always good. Flooding is bad. We are struggling with flooding. In one side, we are struggling with extreme drought. And this creates a lot of risks even for the financial industry. So primarily banking, who's sanctioned loans, insurance, who's insured that capital, and asset owners whose asset is lost or gets stranded. So if you own a property that is close to the sea in Mumbai, chances are that you might not get insurance on that property. You might not even get very good loans on that property, or you might not be able to sell that property, so it becomes a stranded asset. So all of this is causing a huge chaos, and the largest push to capture climate risk is coming from the banking industry, but it's very core to even the real economy, the built environment, the organizations that we know and we touch and see every day. So what is climate risk, right? It is the financial and operational disruption caused by climate change. Put in simple words, any damage to civilization, to property, to business, to money that has happened because of an event triggered by climate change is falling under this climate risk bucket, right? So not a fun fact here that in India more than 36% of country's forest cover is estimated to be prone to frequent forest fires, right? So we have not even scratched the surface of exploring how wild this can be, and it can be way worse than the LA wildfires that we see right now or California wildfires. And we've seen this, like in Uttarakhand there were wildfires a couple of years back, even last year, and now they're trying to mitigate it with fight fire with fire kind of analogy. So typically when it comes to dividing these risks, they lie in these two buckets. One is the physical risk and second is the transition risk. So in the previous discussion we talked a little bit about transition risk, where a policy that is about to come or a carbon tax that is about to come can really affect the heavy industries because the transition risk will be very high. So that's I'll talk about it a little more. And physical risks are more direct damage to assets caused by, let's say, flooding, drought, sea level rise, extreme weather events. Now all of this will lead to financial impacts, right? These risks don't exist in a silo. They will affect your credit risk, they will affect liquidity, they will affect market risk, and literally damage your assets physically, right? So these two definitions of risk are typical in a climate risk equation. How much is my physical risk? How much is my transition risk today? And physical risk can be very acute. I can plan for this year that this year the prediction is the heat will be worse. And even a lot of us who would think that, okay, we are living in Mumbai, maybe cyclone is not going to happen this year, but can the heat go so high that your worker productivity reduces, right? So now there are studies and there are even data sets available that can help you calculate how much productivity will be lost each year just due to a thing like heat stress, right? And heat stress also manifests into illness in a country like India where construction is happening in the open, and there is very less hygiene overall in the civic environment as well. So all of this heat plus bacteria plus dust creates new paradigms of risk that are health hazards, right? Which are again more chronic in nature. So physical risk could be very acute, it could be systemic chronic, or it could be forming, like what we talked about in the case of Mumbai. Maybe the sea level won't rise just this month or next year. Maybe the sea level will rise 20 years from now, where a lot of hotels will be washed out, or at least one floor of the hotel would be underwater. Then transition risks typically fall under these buckets. So there is risk coming, and transition, why is it called transition risk? Typically, it's because there is a huge push to transition to a green economy, and to transition to a green economy, there will be a lot of risks on the policy front. So if there is a regulation and you don't comply, or your threshold is way high and you're not meeting the legal law or the local law, there is a policy risk. Then there is a technology risk, market risk, rep risk. So reputational risk is just my consumer just flee away because I am not a eco-conscious brand. That's also a transition risk. That happened with H&M, where they got a lot of slack just because they were eco-labeling and the produce was not actually verified, or they didn't have the right assurance. So they were greenwashing, green labeling without backup or evidence backups. So that caused reputation risk. It could be as simple as that. Market risk, your access to capital, to liquidity, to create more products, to generate more assets, that can suffer. And in the end, even risks like EV versus oil and gas, right? That's a huge conversation. So if you are super invested in EVs versus if someone is super invested in internal combustion engines, these two technologies could kill each other, right? There could be a law that says all of this internal combustion engines will be phased out. Or in the case of Delhi, they said, okay, one day even numbers, one day odd numbers. So half the vehicles you are practically stopping, right, from the road. So people will shift to EVs. So that creates another set of risks called transition risk. And this applies to individual assets, to multiple companies in your portfolio, and even as retail investors, when we are investing in the stock market, we have to slowly start considering these factors as well, right? Banks are already doing it, insurers are already doing it, pension funds that originate a lot of capital are doing it. So now coming into how to deal with this risk, right? So we have established that the risk is real, climate change is real, its impacts are real. But how can I embed this in my company strategy? So for every risk, there is also an opportunity. And all of this is possible if I embed climate risk management in my enterprise risk, right? So this is a simple view of transition risk, physical risk, which we've already discussed, into opportunities where you can invest in more resource efficiency, better energy sources, better products, markets, resilience. All of that comes with a deep understanding of what these risks are, how they affect your business, how they affect the community around you, quantifying its financial impact, its impact on your income, balance sheet, cash flow, how does it impact your revenues. If it's a market risk, it can really impact those sides. If it's a physical risk, it can impact your assets, right? So when the Paris Climate Agreement came into force, these three things were kind of agreed upon and pushed for. That one, we limit the average global temperature increase to less than 2 degrees. Less than 2 degrees by the year 2100 as compared to pre-industrial levels. So this is around 1970s. Say if we compare, by 2100 we have to limit it to 2 degrees, and we've already overshot 1.5 degree, which is the actual ideal target. So we've almost matched that already, right? Then the second was enhancing. So this is most talked about when we talk about Paris Climate Agreement. Everyone says 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees we have to limit. But the other two are probably the most important that will enable number one, which is enhancing resilience and adaptation to climate impacts. A lot of times you cannot capture these risks, but you can adapt. If not mitigate, you can adapt, right? A lot of countries have set up such beautiful infrastructure in such adversity, right? So for example, the Nordic belt is cold throughout, is dark throughout, but they are doing amazing business. They've adapted, they're using energy very well, the quality of life is the best, the education is best, the healthcare is best. Again, population is not their problem, that's also one reason. But countries like, and the opposite example would be UAE, right? They see extreme hot weather, but they have adapted very well. So it's not always about beating the weather or defeating climate change. It could also be enhancing resilience to adapt to climate change. So a lot of science fiction, if we will read and see futuristic movies, so most scenarios will put a very dark, gloomy, reddish picture and one guy wearing a exosuit, right? Literally to survive, they need a bodysuit that gives them nutrition. So that is not very far, if to be honest, right? If we reach human survivable limit, temperature gets beyond that, then practically we'll either need to be indoors or if we have to walk out, we'll need to wear some kind of clothing or suit. Like we wear jackets in the winter. So that's climate adaptation. And then aligning financial flows in the world with these objectives, these two objectives. So a lot of financial flows. Now Trump has gotten out of climate agreement. So the $11 billion that were earmarked for this particular climate specific investment are immediately they withdrawn that, right? So that 11 billion will not flow into what the third mandate was. But most other countries are going to stick, France, not sure. And because of this, it has also created a lot of sustainable finance pathways. So there are more sustainable finance tracks going on upstairs. So anyone interested in sustainable finance should definitely look at the agenda and see when that session is, if that's not already happened. Right, so and this is coming to India as well. So the opportunity side of this is that if you are a risk conscious business, if you are a risk averse business, and if you have factored in climate risk somewhere, it is still starting out in India, so you don't have to be a very deep climate risk expert today. You have to start somewhere, right? So we were talking about green buildings. So HDFC did create a lot of funds from the IFC for affordable and green homes. SBI has done agreements with solar projects. SIDBI and World Bank have invested close to $500 million for MSMEs who are going to invest this capital in green finance. And this happens at a macro and a micro level both, where a development finance institution like World Bank, IFC, they will fund other governments, other banks, but all the way to a micro example where we worked with a company called Pratibha Syntex. It is a textile, it's a garment manufacturer, and they manufacturer for, they are a manufacturer for brands like H&M, Prana. So H&M actually gave them a 5 crore grant to set up solar infra, and that was again a green project. And this 5 crore, whatever credits are generated out of that, go back to H&M, and practically all the energy saved is ROI for the supplier. So H&M has invested billions now in such programs. So if they can do this with one small supplier in Indore, give them 5 crore once in 5 years, 3 years, the investment commitment is really, really high, right? So even not just financial institutions, but brands are doing it. So for your business, if that is an opportunity area, you should look at this sustainable finance and where you can get funding from. And it doesn't need to be only green finance, it can be a social linked finance where you are achieving some social targets and you are availing some sustainability linked bonds. So this is again talking a little about financial institutions, Bank of England, RBI, all of these institutions are putting enormous pressure on even banks, sub-regulators, regional regulators to tighten their grip on sustainable finance, right? And that follows this process. Now some of this jargon is irrelevant for this audience right now. It's more banking specific, but typically the idea is to measure, disclose, set targets, develop a strategy, take action, and keep doing this again and again until we reach net zero emissions by 2050. Now the recent study says net zero emissions by 2050 is already missed. We cannot actually do it, but we'll still fight. India's goal is seeming more realistic. They have taken a 2070 pledge. And there are many central organizations and guiding bodies that can help in this, right? So there is a banking alliance, there is accounting alliance, there is science-based targets, there is climate action pacts. So we'll send this presentation later, and you can see which level are you right now. If you want to avail any of this financing, what should you sign up to, or whom should you look up to for financing? And then the next few slides will talk about how you can incorporate it in your own organization or your company, right? So this I think is not working. Can you check? Oh, okay, started working. Thank you. So key steps in analyzing what are the climate risks for you today is, first, of course, identifying what risks could affect you, whether they are physical risks or transition risks. Are you in industries that can see huge amount of taxes in the coming future? A close reference would be, are you in one of the CBAM industries? Because carbon tax is likely to impact those industries first. Are you intermediaries who are flowing into CBAM industry? Are you a upstream supplier of the fertilizer industry, or are you a downstream distributor of aluminum products or of steel products? So one of our customers, they manufacture these aluminum and plastic films that are used to package medicines. So your paracetamol, blister packs, and all of these medicine packaging, they manufacture it. Now they are huge into aluminum procurement, because typically aluminum is used for most of the packaging, aluminum and plastic. So for their aluminum and for their exports, they will also come under CBAM, and they have to give their product carbon footprint to whoever they are sending their product to, and they are taking a very radical approach where they are going very detailed and batch level. But you have to identify that is one risk, right? So I can be prepared for that, adapt to that, or put mitigation measures for that. Now, then assessing what this risk can really do to me, right? So COVID-19 nobody thought of, but it led to supply chain disruptions. Similarly, heat events or extreme weather events in any geography can lead to your supply chain getting eroded. So a lot of organizations are now centralizing or bringing their supply chain either very close to them, or creating redundancies, that I will invest in this geography and this geography and this geography, so that one plant, if it gets shut, I am still able to work with the rest of the plants, right? So we know how enormous the impact of Chinese products not flowing into the economy was during COVID, to the tune that if you would have seen, if we use the Dettol hand wash, the top part which goes up and down and the liquid comes through that, essentially that mechanism, India did not have the machinery to make it. It was always Chinese import, and all the products made out after that either imported from China through Malaysia, or they tried to manufacture in India, but you will see these small bottles with big heads of those dispensers or the mechanism, right? Because India did not have that precision manufacturing for that use case. India has amazing manufacturing, but for that always the dependency was China, and so was for a lot of goods, lot of small parts, cheap parts, toys, all of these industries struggled. So similarly, if tomorrow a earthquake hits China, or let's go to climate risk, if a wildfire starts in China and they, like a lot of these factories turn to dust, right? What will you do? You cannot service the demand because you don't have capacity now, and no business would invest in that capex just in a day and then get ready with that machinery. So that is the kind of business that this can happen, that it can do. If you are a retail outlet, your retail presence can go down. If you are a manufacturer, your operations can get shut. And then there is a notion of scenario analysis which you can run. It is more like a what if analysis, which is common in general risk assessment, but you can also do it for climate. So there are multiple scenarios which we'll look at, and these are just projections, hypothetical projections. And one would say, I don't have real data. Why am I doing hypothetical projections? It's because unless you question what if this happens, you will never think of that event to be an actual event, and you have to create enough scenarios for yourself to be broadly prepared, if not absolutely prepared for those, right? You should know what is my readiness in case the temperature rise doesn't stop, or what is my readiness if it stops tomorrow, if the world discovers a new technology in 10 years that magically absorbs all the carbon in the atmosphere, then I'm good to go, right? Why should I overinvest? So all of those scenarios you have to consider, and then integrate all of these findings into your strategy. So typically this is what TCFD recommends. TCFD is again Task Force for Climate Related Financial Disclosures, but it recommends that you set up a governance structure for risk, then you build a strategy, you embed it in a part as a key part of your risk management frameworks, whatever risk management or ERM frameworks you're using, and then keep measuring and disclosing these targets, and this kind of keeps going on, right? So climate risk management, how do you identify risk, assess its impact, identify what measures could you use to respond to these risks, then is mitigation possible, is adaptation possible, how do I risk finance, how do I hedge my bets, how do I minimize and address losses and damages of the future, of the present, and then out of this exercise you will start prioritizing how will the funds come for this. If my assets are close to the sea, I know insurance premiums are going to rise tomorrow, I could not get an insurance, can I insure them now, right? Can I get a longer term insurance that I have caught the risk before the insurer does, let's get insured, right? Then implement your priorities, monitor, and this keeps on as a feedback loop. And the risks just at a high level could be higher temperatures, higher frequency of floods on the physical risk side, rising sea level, reduced water supply. For example, in Bangalore, a large part of population is unable to work properly because there's a water crisis, right? So even work from home suffers a lot. I used to live in Chennai for a while, and there 1 year there was extreme drought and a very dry period, right? Some 210 days without rains, and then literally people had to shift their households. They started living with their cousins or relatives outside of Chennai. So massive disruption to even human capital, work capital, right? And then there are again the other risks around political risks, regulatory, supply chain risks. Most businesses don't own their supply chain, they're dependent on transport, airways, seaways, as well as roads. Energy segment. Now, so yeah, I think this can be a lot boring, but what it's essentially saying is the direction of assessing these risks, right? So you have to first assess global effects of a situation. What are the direct physical risks at a global level? Then what are different kinds of risks, product market risks, regulatory risks, political risks, and then you have to look at firm level effects, meaning your company level effects of those global risks, right? So we'll send this to you so you can go over this in a more detailed view, but essentially what this graphic or this table is trying to communicate is you identify risk buckets at a global level first, then break it down to firm level targets, metrics or risks, then classify what are the low impact ones, high impact ones, again under those same buckets, and then use a lot of these tools, right? So what are these tools? There is of course data analysis required, there is hedging is a tool, right? So you can manage risks. So for example, manufacturing firms, they can hedge against volatile energy costs by securing fixed rate contracts. That's something they do. Or a lot of our customers, they have already implemented energy utilization in the way that they will buy from the grid in non-peak hours, right? And for the rest, they'll charge batteries or they'll have solar infra. Then calculate what is the value at risk, right? Without quantifying how much monetary risk exposure there is, you can't really, that's kind of the first piece of the puzzle. A lot of times, you can't even understand the enormity of the risk. That's heavy in insurance industry, banking and finance industry, value at risk, or now there is a new notion of climate or climate value at risk, right? It's called a CVAR. Then how is your supply chain configuration optimized for supply chain resilience, secure insurance while there's time, and try to make small investments that kind of are multi-directional, right? That keep you an agile organization. When you know a risk exists, over-indexing on a bet can also go wrong. So if you over-index on hedging, that can go wrong. If you over-index on, let's say, today everyone is thinking, okay, EV is the next thing. If I over-index on EV, tomorrow that can be a risk, right? Because EV batteries are still not validated. What if a law comes that EV wasn't great? Now the next thing is hydrogen. How will you flip your bets immediately? That is not going to happen. And do all of this scenario planning. So all of what we are discussing right now is also scenarios, like what if EVs go south? What if now Trump has said we will drill, right? So what is the impact of that? Then oil and gas is more easily viable, available. Why would I not burn it, right? But can I burn it in a contained way? Can I capture the carbon? All of that. And then going back to the same analogy, once we've assessed these buckets, low impact, high impact, then we assess what are my responses, what is the firm's response externally and internally. So what am I going to communicate outward, and how am I going to restructure, internalize these risks and reallocate my investment, increase awareness internally, especially at a board level, where the financing will have to come from, and then all the way to employees, right? It's almost has to be a unified mission. And I think we covered a little bit of that, but there are set scenarios that some bodies have created which say, okay, if the world goes to a delayed net zero transition, then it will probably be high on transition risk and low on or medium on physical risk. But with current policies, we are going to end up with a hothouse where the temperatures can, the idea is to limit it to 1.5, but it can all the way go to 4 degrees rise in the same time, right? So you can use some of these data sets to just identify what is going to hit you in the short term, medium term, long term, and create divergent scenarios, create far off scenarios so that you can make a overview or a perspective, right? So till here you need to be myopic, but till there you need to have that 30,000 foot view, because you could really over index on this path and this can go really south, whereas over indexing on this path could also lead you somewhere else, right? So you have to balance both, and that's why scenario analysis helps. There are experts to do this, so they can guide you. We have some experts to do this, they can also guide you. And I think we are close to concluding this session, but what is the cost of not mitigating climate risk? Before that, one statement is that the cost of inaction is far greater than mitigating, adapting, right? So inaction is going to be the most expensive. You either work towards mitigating, adapting, or shut down, right? That's probably the only options from a longer term perspective. In the short term, everyone can make hay while the sun shines. And what is the cost? It's typically higher operational cost. Assets will get damaged, global assets will get damaged. Real estate companies will specifically struggle, right? Because of all of these activities, deforestation, soil erosion, it's very difficult to maintain real estate assets also now. And then there are sector specific challenges, right? Energy has its own challenges, retail has its own challenges. I know all of the industries here will have their own challenges. Reputational, regulatory, we've already talked about. So the cost, in short, is huge, and climate risk shouldn't be looked at beyond risk. It is a part of inherent internal risks, right? So any organization that takes risk seriously has to absolutely embrace this conversation. And to end, one case study on how this information can be presented to the real world, but it also gives an idea of how much this organization internalized something, right? So this is Decathlon. I'm sure most of us would know this brand. It's a sports clothing, sports goods manufacturer. It's a French company with operations everywhere, with supply chains everywhere. Now, the first thing, identify risks and opportunities, right? So, what are the physical and transition risks, and what are the opportunities? So, on the design side, one transition risk is a legislation related to product labeling, right? So, there are in Europe there are a lot of product labeling conventions. That's a risk for them on design side. Eco design is an opportunity. Land use and raw materials. So the cotton availability and price volatility of cotton came to them as a risk. There's water stress on suppliers because their suppliers are again in India and China, where water stress is huge. So in India, China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, everywhere water stress is becoming a thing. Logistics challenges. So this is like a canvas they made for their business. It would look a lot different for your business. Maybe you're not into design, maybe you don't use the raw materials. So these verticals will look different. These things will pretty much stay. Now then they classified and created a heat map of risks and opportunities, right? What is the extreme risk? Black swan, nobody can prepare for it. But what are the other risks that are the low hanging fruits right now, right? Which I can capture fast, and it also creates an upside for my business. And then what are some of the opportunities that are imminent, high on impact, and high on, let's say, frequency, right? So it's probability versus impact they mapped. And then they went deeper into each of these pillars, whatever was agreed upon as a significant amount of risk. Now this is a chart of where their suppliers are located and where they are at a high risk. So specifically this belt, if we see, extremely high, these are the suppliers in India, right? And those are some further east, and that is one. And some of these are green, so that's fine. But most of their supply chain is at medium high to extremely high risk when it comes to water stress. Temperature rising risk for stores. Now this was a metric which we were discussing earlier, that your worker productivity could go down, or also if it's too hot outside, who will walk up to your store and buy sports goods from you? They would rather operate online. So is it worth operating these stores, or is it better to just have dark stores and logistics presence there with some e-commerce angle, right? So this will also help business strategies to get developed. It's not just about capturing risk and publishing it and saying, oh, we are capturing it, but what are the steps I will take for these red dots here, right? So it's a large part of it is around that. And here again, India has a lot of those in the extreme high bit, right? Especially Eastern markets have that. So, and then they also did a transition risk analysis on worldwide carbon taxes in Americas, in Europe, in Asia, and then individual countries that they're supplying to. So this is a very thorough exercise, right? So this is typically how this information can be arrived at, presented, but also it's very actionable, right? I can really see these are the hotspots in my value chain, in my operation, in my retail. So with that I will stop. These are some questions with no answers. Even I don't have these answers, but for us to internalize and ask ourselves. So any questions? Happy to take questions. Any thoughts? Thank you everyone again.
Aro, it was a very full of insights, I would say. It was a good presentation,
Thank you so
excellent
much.
content. The basic question that comes to my mind every time when we talk of net zero is, where did this deadline come from?
Right.
2050 we missed, right? 2070 now, like you also mentioned that now India has taken approach which is probably more realistic. But the question is it still realistic? One. And when this deadline was decided or agreed upon, so was a real study done around that to be able to achieve it?
There was a little bit. So it's yeah. I think it's a lot hard to also be super realistic because of the lack of historical data. So the first study that happened was back in the 80s, if I'm not wrong, when the Brundtland report had come out, 1987 or something. It could be earlier or around that time. And after that, the first thing they took was this millennium goal, right? So it was that moving to the next century will achieve some of these targets, which massively got missed. So they miscalculated the first time around, but then the general consensus was we didn't implement it in the right way. It wasn't like a treaty, it was more like a voluntary thing everyone agrees on. So then after even the Kyoto Protocol failed because of that, and then the whole Millennium Goals failed, MDGs I think those were called. And then in 2015 they revised a lot of learnings they had internalized from that. So with IPCC and two other bodies and I think the same culprits, the WRI and WBCSD, they came together, got a lot of climate scientists on the board, and their whole thing was, okay, this is where we could go, but then they gave all the scenarios, right, the concentration pathways, that it could be all the way to 6, 6.5, 8.5, or it could be 1.5. And they said, let's try for this. And I think everybody knew, right, it is unreal to accept it while you're not even 10 years into the 10 years into the mandate is pretty unreal. But that was the first time where a treaty was signed where it was more legal in nature, and I think it is still far out. I think even 2100 will get missed. The only way, my personal belief is adaptation is the way. Mitigation, that ship has sailed, unless we can figure out a way to Mars.
And the biggest surprise is like of Trump administration coming. I mean, it's definitely going to shift further.
Yeah. For sure. I think only thing what organizations are worried about now, I would not say they're coming from a good place. They're saying, oh no, we have to still do the right thing, but nobody cares. Honestly, humans only care about us as a species surviving. They don't really care about the planet, right? We obviously take that stance that we are saving the planet, we are saving some trees, some honeybees and all of that. But we are a very selfish species, it's always a survival of the fittest. And right now at a country level also we are becoming that, right? Again, going back to that rat race. So a lot of companies have over-invested, and they are now seeing that with the new administration coming in, all their bets could be in the wrong pocket. So they have literally come together and given written letters and documents to the regulators that please don't delay this regulation, right? That's happening in the Europe right now, CSRD. Last 17th Jan, the European Commission said we are planning to do a 3-year freeze on CSRD implementation, and this time we will take to reflect. So 3 years they'll take to reflect, and then they'll implement a new law. And 400 companies in Europe have written them a letter, including Unilever, Carrefour, all the big names in Europe. They have written a letter that the regulation is fine, we agree to it, you can just phase it a little bit, but don't cancel it. So it's the other way around, right? People are requesting the regulator to regulate. So I think everyone essentially cares about money, and it's all about the balance we can find, right? So any other questions? Yeah.
So I've seen recent reports, lot of energy is being consumed by AI
Absolutely.
applications wherever they're running, tons and tons of energy. How is AI is spreading like wildfire, faster than the LA wildfire.
Yeah.
How do you see this getting under control?
Okay, so AI, I have a lot of perspectives, some are personal, but I think one is that there is a law called Moore's law where every year the number of transistors you can put on a chip doubles, and that we have done very well, right? So if you look at the NVIDIA founder who practically powers half or more than half of the AI infra globally, their transistors and their GPUs are becoming super efficient. So the energy utilization per compute is reducing drastically. Second is, it is a big energy guzzler. It will start competing with the real estate world and all the other top 5-6 industries, right? But the energy debate, I think, is true for everything. It's true for EVs. I think we have to find better ways of sourcing energy. And a lot of times grid can be more contained. So instead of household burning of things, a data center at least is well cordoned off. You can do a lot of optimizations there. But I think the crux of it is finding good energy sources. So I would say nuclear could be a very good bet to power these GPUs, these data centers, and you could keep them well off grid. That's the power of cloud and AI working together, right? You can keep it in a very distant silo and put it all nuclear powered. That could be one scenario. The other could be just keep finding better ways globally and keep distributing these data centers all over. But I think the compute versus energy, that equation will get way cheap, and that's why AI is getting cheaper by the day. Earlier it was expensive, now it's $20 per month to use a ChatGPT Pro. It will further reduce, more advanced models will come. But I think the pressure, the volume of data centers, we can't expect to go down. We have to move to energy sources that are better. I think nuclear is going to be a good bet. And recently I saw a innovation where these are like nuclear small personal nuclear reactors that's being prototyped in the US, and it's also gotten some approvals, where you can power your home for a couple of for at least a decade just using that one small pod and then replace the core, right? So they're making it super safe, all of that. So I think nuclear or alternate energy will be the best bet, because nobody is going to underplay the AI wave. Everyone's going to over-index on that for a while.
I would like to add there. I think right now we are not using AI to create energy sources for AI. I think that is also going to come, right? Where we'll start using AI to optimize the energy needs for AI. And as you know now AI is writing agents, and those agents are becoming better. So earlier humans were creating AI. Now we are right at the cusp where AI is improving itself, right? So I think we are very close to, and I think if you read some of the futurists, right, they are saying we are very close to an energy abundance where the cost of energy is falling drastically. If you see, but now consumption is increasing, that's a separate point. But the cost of energy, if you have a solar grid and you're selling into the grid, you're not even getting ₹2.5 now, right? And why is government not giving more than that? Because they have excess now. At night time is a different issue, but daytime there is sometimes excess. In Germany, something happened. Germany is not taking electricity even if you want to feed it into grid. There's already an excess for daytime. So I think we are approaching that, and this is happening maybe in small pockets, but energy abundance is already there. Right?
I think the large problem is also concentration of cities, right?
Yeah.
So it will be huge here, but overall energy demand, there is equitable overall.
To make it equitable and to distribute it further, you will need more batteries. And for batteries, obviously, again, you're more dependent on more raw materials, which go into battery which is controlled by 2 or 3 countries, we know. Again, it becomes a further supply chain issue. Same is the case with nuclear. So you go with renewable, you go with nuclear, you need more raw materials which are again controlled by 2 or 3 countries. Do you think that dependence on those raw materials will drop further to probably power either renewable or from the
I think some of these notions we will have to break and rethink from scratch, because right now when we think of energy storage, we immediately think of batteries. Can we design a energy storage solution, right? That would be the ideal brief, and then work towards that. So some of these new age technologists and some of the people we now follow and respect for their guts, they go to something like first principles thinking, right? Where I will not design a new car, I will design a solution to transport you from A to B, and that could be a new paradigm. So I think it will need some of that. But if we keep adding more to this problem, it's not going to help. I think we have to remove things from the system now.
Not only on the upstream side, downstream also is a problem.
Correct, correct. Distribution and sourcing, both is a problem.
Materials are getting disrupted, new storage materials are coming, which is not in the hands of a few.
Are we at time?
Right? So that is also happening.
So material science innovation,
Hydrogen has come up in a big way, right? And all, and like Saudi and everyone is pushing for hydrogen, which may be safer to transport, safer to burn, right? And so yeah, very different. And then again, maybe there is basically equilibrium where storage plus runtime, like combustible and all this is all.
I think we're getting a time check here. One last question.
There is a already button cell with a nuclear. Once you put it into cell, it lasts for 50 years.
Okay.
And that you must be knowing.
Yeah,
it is
similar
already there.
to a reaction based, right?
So you need not have to do any charging. Once you put it,
Yeah.
the small button cell, it can charge 50 years to your cell phone.
So there's a lot of innovation happening for sure.
That's the beauty of nuclear. It's long lasting.
Yeah. I think.
Might live longer.
There is something called micro turbines. I just read that the government has invested a lot in that.
Yeah.
It was out in yesterday's newspaper that UP government has taken an initiative to implement for almost 1 crore houses with micro wind turbine.
Okay. So I think wind projects are better if you do it at scale, because when you generate micro, there is a lot of loss unless you are trying to power only that household. If you want to feed that back into the grid, the household, when it's generating electricity while it's flowing itself, there are many losses. There is a hysteresis loss and all of that fluctuation based losses. So most of it will get lost in transmission. If you want to use it for just your house, then it will be seasonal like solar, where sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there, then you charge a battery, half the time use this. But micro solar can only solve micro problems. I think it can't solve big problems. Bigger solutions could be on the wind farms offshore, right, or in the middle of the ocean. You create a lot of wind farms. So even India is doing a lot on that, and I think the Gujarat whole expressway and the corridors where it's more industrial area, there's all windmills there. So I think that's a better bet. But overall, wind has its own set of problems, because when you play with something you don't know, you end up disrupting something else. So offshore or on the sea wind, they started harvesting and they created a lot of windmills, but the ecosystem, the migratory birds as well as the sea ecosystem just neighboring, it kind of went really bad, and then it created a new set of risks on the biodiversity side, right? So I think it's very difficult to play with nature systems sometimes unless we understand the whole thing. But yeah, I think we're now definitely at time. Sorry, Sakshi. But thank you everyone for this back-to-back session.
So thank you, Aro, for the insightful session. So we have arranged lunch side and apav also, so we can have lunch. And whoever has not filled the form, please do fill the form at the registration desk. So we will be able to send you the presentation and other material related to the session. And I would like to request everybody for a group photo, please. Yeah.
How will you fit so many people in a photo?
We will fit it. Please everybody join. Aro, Adi, Rucha.
Ambitious project.
Ambitious project. Gen Zs can take the selfie.
So leave it to the photographer to come down. Leave it to
No, don't need chairs. No chairs.
You won't have it like this.
You will take the photo.
I think the taller people can stand behind.
He will take the photo.
Like this.
He can.
He can take the photo. But you want all of those people on the stage?
Then only this logo will come. Where how there is no
We can manage.
Okay.
Please everyone.
So she and British is yes, yes,
No, nothing like that. Rucha, Rohan. Huh? Guys, please join. Please. I think we can sit also. Harshita?
Ajo, squeeze in.
Yeah, we can sit. Rucha.
what will we call? 1, 2, 3.
G.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone.